Why, hello there. I hope you're doing well. It's turning into fall here in Portland, which is really nice. All the leaves are starting to turn, and it's really pretty outside. Today we're going to discuss R.F. Kuang's latest book, KATABASIS or KATABASIS. I have no idea how to pronounce it. My wife actually sent me an Instagram reel where somebody went on about that exact thing. It was published this month in September 2025. And I would say the best summary of this book is Grad School is Hell. And it has as many layers to it as Dante's Inferno did. I think that Catabasis is a love letter to books about hell or death or the underworld. Kuang references Dante throughout it. She references Orpheus and Persephone. So basically, the Greek and she calls the Lord of Death Lord Yama, which, based on my reading of the book, is a Chinese god of death or Lord of the Underworld or however you want to describe it. There's a couple more recent uh, explanations or things that she describes as representing hell, and one of them is T.S. Eliot's Wastelands, and you know that's not even that modern compared to, like, this book. The characters in this book, it took place in the 90s, 80s or 90s. I can't remember exactly which, but it's actually, there's a reason in the text why there's not newer or more recent books about hell than what she refers to. Her insert character, Law, I cannot remember her first name. Uh, the character is clearly a self insert. Like, R.F. Kuang had some issues with grad school. Thought that going through grad school was going to hell, um, and so this character notes that there hasn't been newer references, and so in that regard, clearly Kuang made a decision about what to include and what not to include, and then whenever she just realized at some point that there was no modern books in it, like newer than the 70s or 80s, she came up with an explanation about that. I mean, it's actually a pretty important plot point within the text, um, why there's no books, and part of it's because there's nobody who's returned. Why is she in hell anyway? So uh, she accidentally caused the death of her dissertation advisor and felt that the only way that she could graduate was to go down to hell and drag him back, which really just shows how fucked up grad school made her feel. I definitely, I know there's a significant difference between getting a PhD and getting a master's thesis, and I never experienced any of these sort of things with my master's thesis. Um, I had a lot of fun. I really enjoyed what I learned in my master's thesis, like in my master's program, and then in my master's thesis. But I do know that when my wife was getting her dissertation, going through her PhD, it was really hellacious. It was really hard, and I do think that there is probably some differences between what a someone getting their electrical engineering PhD goes through and someone getting a language PhD goes through. I would expect that there's a difference in when you feel done, and I think that really matters within this book. So over the course of Catabasis, we learn more about what happened, and we learn about she has a companion that goes with her, Peter Murdoch. I initially thought that they were exes because of the way that Law was describing Peter, and but it turns out that like she really hated him, but was obsessed with certain things about him, and was like would look at him in a certain way and was like, oh, I really care for this guy, but I can't stand him, and so you know, over the course of the book, you kind of learn the truth of their relationship and what it actually was, which is fine. I think it's interesting. I almost feel in some ways that she pivoted from the original that they were next to this other explanation, which also works. I mean, it's fine. So one of the things that's interesting about this book is that there's a serious focus on how the dead process being dead, how they process their sins, and then how they are reborn. And a reborn person has no memories of their past lives because there's no, there's, and they explain what happens. There's a river called the River Lathe that if you step into it, you lose memories. And if you drink from it, you lose all your memories. And, so that's the end goal of going through the layers of hell. And they represent, the sins based off of what happens in hell. No one remembers in any recent memory of anybody actually going across, drinking from the river, and being reborn. And I think the reason for this approach is interesting because she argues that people dying and being stuck forever in hell is not commensurate with the sins that were committed in life. And it just makes sense that you should recycle and reincarnate souls. I mean, after they've learned whatever the lesson they need to in hell, they can move on. This stands in contrast in a lot of ways to other visions of the afterlife, like Valhalla or heaven. There's really no other land of the dead except for hell. Um, you know, I mean, she assumed that her professor went to hell. So since there's no way to avoid sin in life, there's always going to be one of the sins that you actually have to go through. And each of them kind of are designed to play into that sin's worst temptations. Like pride is the very first layer, and it focuses on you have to write a dissertation about what is the good. So many people that are in this layer of hell are academics, and they're language experts, and they never succeed. um, they have to submit their dissertation to somebody. They don't know who it is or what the criteria are, but they know whenever it's been rejected. Like I said, I think there's a specific difference between graduate school and for the hard sciences. I didn't even get a really hard science. It's called innovation sciences, but it still had very clear null hypothesis tests, and that could be done through a survey, and the analysis and the review of the literature was something that could be constrained. And I don't know a lot about what language sort of PhDs that you would write. I know for if you get in like masters of fine arts creative writing, you have to write a book. So I mean I've written 3. Those can take a long time, and I don't even know if any of these 3 would pass the muster for that, because it's not literary fiction, they're all genre fiction. With my book, with my thesis, I had a really clear null hypothesis, which is what you're trying to disprove. Is like there was no benefit for being an academic spinoff. So I was researching entrepreneurship and focused on academic, like companies that came out of an academic research. And I just had to do the research and be able to identify, see what the data showed and say whether there was or there wasn't. And in some cases, there was a mixed bag. In some cases, it was clear that being an academic spinoff was beneficial. Um, and I mean, I liked writing my thesis. I loved digging into the research. I mean, I think that this channel kind of proves that. I mean, I'm sitting here talking about books, and I do these sort of analyses with fiction, with nonfiction books too, which isn't exactly what most people strive to go and do, but I enjoy it. So I didn't personally identify with the grad school's hell thing. Um, Maybe that's because I went to a Dutch grad school instead of Cambridge. Maybe it's because I was very fascinated and I just got to read for a year and a half and got to enjoy and have conversations that I excelled in. But so one of the things that I didn't experience was basically being sexually harassed and propositioned by my advisor. And, I know that that sort of thing happens to women in grad school, and there's a lot of gross things that go on there. And it sucks. And, as soon as that happens, it would dramatically change everything about grad school. Even if it was going well, anything after that moment is going to be just a continual ongoing scar, especially since you're going to have to deal with this advisor who, tried to force himself on you. But even beside that, all the interactions that you had with him before, you're going to be second guessing. And this is really described well in the book. There's other ramifications in the book for her with this, and I think they're really well handled. But I think that afterlife is an interesting aspect of all fantasy, and I'm going to talk about two other kind of fantasy universes. Le Guin, the Earthsea books by Ursula K. Le Guin, and they do. The main character, Sparrowhawk or Ged, does go to the afterlife, and it's actually part of being a wizard that you have the ability to go there, and it marks you in a certain way. And all wizards know when somebody has done it. They know if another wizard has gone to the afterlife. It leaves an imprint on them. If you try to cross, there is a physical wall, and this wall you shouldn't cross, and even getting close to it has a cost. But if you cross it, there's an almost insurmountable cost to doing that. But whenever you're at the wall, the dead come up and try and touch you. They want to be. It's the only time they experience any life in their. Otherwise they're kind of listless. They're depressed. They just wander about, and we find out that there's ruins, and it's just like the dead just accumulate. They don't go anywhere. They don't get processed. They just are there. And nobody in the world knows why. Nobody knows what the point of having this massive collection of souls that are listless like this. It makes you wonder why, and why a universe would be created with this sort of afterlife, especially whenever you kind of compare it to Kwong's, where it's like there's a clear it's not, I wouldn't say it's a restorative justice, but in a way that there is a way of processing who you were and a way of growing as a person. And then as you get through all the phases of it that you don't have to go through all of them. You based off of your sins, you have like a little list that you have to go through. And and based off of processing them, that shows that you've matured past them. And that means you're worthy of being reborn. And it makes you wonder why this doesn't happen in other worlds. And in fact, I think that it's a really sad place that the dead go in Le Guin's world, especially considering how vibrant her living space is. That the dead go into this shadowy, malformed space. The other one I think is interesting in comparison to it is the Malazan Book of the Fallen's Realm of the Dead. This world has really complex magic that is ill-defined. That the wielders in the universe don't understand. The gods don't really understand. There are layers of magic realms on top of each other. One of the oldest ones that we learn of is called Holds, and that's very ancient magic. It's like from the first magic users, first species used it, like the, and then there's warrens which sit on top of it, and they're not perfectly aligned, and so you can have a warren that crosses multiple of them or sits in an older one, and it does certain things, and the gods of the warrens of the newer realms don't understand the all the old stuff that's there. So it's complicated and it's challenging, and the death realm's the same way. And like the you I kind of feel like there's two realms of the dead. One is the real one, and one is another, is a realm that is a warren within a sword, and that's Anomander Rake's sword, which you learn about pretty early in the series. You learn about it earlier than you learn about Hood's realm. Hood is the Lord of Death, but Anomander's sword is just described as like you hear these groans of wagons and clinks of chains and just moans of people in like that are in the sword. And you're introduced to this at the very beginning of the series where Quick Ben and Kalam are they're running from Anomander Rake. And so they summon a demon. And the demon's like, I'm going to kill everybody here. I'm going to kill all of you. After you send me on whoever you want me to kill, I'm going to come back and kill you. And you're like, yeah, about that. That's who we want you to deal with. And the demon just looks at him and just says, like, pray for me. Like, it just is such a dramatic change, like, for that demon. You actually meet the demon later in the story, and it's interesting. Eventually, you do learn what is going on in that realm. It is a place where the soul of these beings are chained to wagons, and they're pulling something away from this chaotic realm of chaos. And the and whenever a spirit gets too tired to pull anymore, they're just tossed in the wagon, and then the wagon is made that much heavier for the people who are still pulling it. And the in the realm of death, like Hood's realm, the gods in this world are interesting because if you do so much as a human or a mortal, you can ascend to becoming a god. And you can also do things insane like you and a bunch of your friends can go and declare war on death and then become the god of death, which is what Hood did. And he was a Jihad, which is basically the this universe's orcs. And he won the war against death and became God. And the interesting thing about death in the death's realm is that it is somewhat more permeable in Malazan than either Katabasis or Earthsea, because there are cases where people just don't go to the death realm, or they end up going to a different warren because of like their god, they're so devoted to their god, or they just find themselves for some unknown reason not in Hood's realm and they're kind of walking around as a ghost. That happens to a number of different characters, and it's really interesting how that impacts those characters who are dead, because they're still growing as an individual even though they're dead, and then also like how they impact the world around them. And of course there's a point in the text where these two realms of death intersect, and it's intentional, where Hood decides to go fight Rake, and well, it's up to your judgment. He's killed by Rake and pulled into the realm, and then you find out that the purpose is there's a reason behind this, that Hood sacrificed himself to bring death, all the realm of the dead, into here to save their reality. And it's just like fucking crazy. And it's like then afterwards there's a new guardian of hell, and it's a group of people, and they were warriors, and it's just really interesting the different types of hells and afterlives that are out there in fantasy. And I think that like in this case, Hood would be a facet of Lord Yama, because Katabasis was basically all the different aspects of the god of death are this one being who's divinely in charge of things. In a lot of ways, Hood was kind of indifferent to it. He did his duty, but didn't really seem to enjoy it. But that is a difference between Lord Yama and Hood, where Lord Yama he's a stern figure, but he really cares about the souls under his watch. I do really like the way that the Malazan Marines interact with their gods. They would like to say, a popular curse they would say, Hood's balls. And yes, Hood has balls, and it's just kind of funny. I don't really think that Katabasis engaged with any of these texts intentionally. I think that there was a choice by Kwong to focus specifically on these older texts and use that to craft this story about grad school and having her characters grow as they go through these layers of hell themselves. And I think I think Kwong really enjoyed reading, Divine Comedy and Dante's Inferno and walking through those, and wanted to try and modernize it for today's readers, which I think is an interesting thing to do. I personally, I didn't think this book was as good as Babel or as good as the Poppy War saga, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting. I thought there were some neat elements to it. I think Kwong does a good job with developing novel magic systems. So I'm going to leave it here at this point. What'd you think of Catabasis? Did you read it? How do you think I should have pronounced it? Um, you know, have you read any of these other books? Did you read Malzahn? Uh, did you read Earthsea? Did you think what kind of Realm of the Dead should I have discussed that I missed? Is there anything that you'd like me to read that you think I ought to read to do another comparison here? But regardless, please like, comment, subscribe below, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good day.